You're walking through a dense, humid forest 300 million years ago. The air is thick, almost suffocating, with oxygen levels nearly double what we breathe today. Massive ferns tower above you like skyscrapers, and the ground beneath your feet squelches with every step. Then you hear it, a sound that would make your blood run cold. Not the roar of a predator, not the snap of breaking branches, but something far more unsettling. The rhythmic, mechanical clicking of hundreds of legs moving in perfect synchronization, getting closer with each passing second. What emerges from the prehistoric shadows isn't a dinosaur or a saber-toothed tiger. It's something far more alien, far more terrifying. 9 feet of segmented horror, as long as a small car and as wide as a dining room table, undulating through the forest floor, with the fluid grace of a nightmare made flesh. This is Arthropleura, and for millions of years it was the undisputed ruler of the terrestrial world, a living, breathing monster that would make even the bravest soul today run screaming in the opposite direction. But here's what's truly mind-blowing. This wasn't some fictional creature dreamed up by Hollywood special effects artists. This was real. This thing actually existed, crawled across our planet, and dominated ecosystems in ways that would fundamentally reshape how we understand the history of life on Earth. When paleontologists first discovered fossilized remains of Arthropleura in coal mines across Europe and North America, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. The sheer scale defied everything they thought they knew about arthropods, the group that includes insects, spiders, and modern millipedes. To put this in perspective, imagine taking a modern millipede, the kind you might find curled up under a log in your backyard, and scaling it up by a factor of 10. That innocent little creature that you can hold in your palm suddenly becomes a writhing mass of chitin and muscle that could look you straight in the eye. But Arthropleura wasn't just big, it was perfectly adapted to be big, with every aspect of its anatomy fine-tuned for maximum efficiency in a world that could actually support such giants. The secret lay in Earth's atmosphere during the Carboniferous period, a time when our planet was barely recognizable compared to today. Oxygen levels soared to unprecedented heights, reaching concentrations of up to 35% compared to our current 21%. This supercharged atmosphere was like rocket fuel for arthropods, whose simple breathing systems could suddenly support massive body sizes that would be impossible in our modern world. It was during this golden age of gigantism that Arthropleura evolved from relatively modest ancestors into the stuff of absolute nightmares. But what made these creatures truly terrifying wasn't just their size, it was their behavior and capabilities. Unlike the gentle, detritus-eating millipedes we know today, Arthropleura was built like a living tank. Its exoskeleton was thick and heavily armored, composed of dozens of overlapping segments that provided both protection and incredible flexibility. When threatened, it could coil its massive body into an impenetrable spiral, presenting nothing but armored plates to any would-be attacker. But when it was on the hunt, it moved with surprising speed and agility, its 750 legs working in perfect coordination to propel it through the dense undergrowth of the Carboniferous forests. The forests themselves were like something from an alien planet. Giant club mosses stretched hundreds of feet into the air, creating cathedral-like canopies that filtered the light into an eternal twilight. Massive horsetails formed dense thickets along the edges of sprawling swamps, while primitive conifers dotted the landscape like ancient sentinels. The forest floor was a labyrinth of fallen logs, rotting vegetation, and shallow pools of stagnant water, the perfect hunting ground for a predator like Arthropleura. And make no mistake, this was a predator. While modern millipedes are content to munch on dead leaves and decomposing matter, evidence suggests that Arthropleura was far more aggressive in its feeding habits. Analysis of fossilized stomach contents and coprolites, that's fossilized poop, for those keeping track, reveals fragments of plant material, yes, but also suspicious amounts of what appears to be animal protein. Some paleontologists theorize that these giants were opportunistic omnivores, supplementing their plant-based diet with anything they could catch and overpower. Imagine being a small amphibian in this prehistoric world. You've just evolved the ability to spend time on land, congratulating yourself on being at the cutting edge of evolutionary innovation, when suddenly the ground beneath you begins to tremble, not with the heavy footfalls of a massive dinosaur, those won't appear for another 100 million years, but with the subtle, rhythmic vibration of hundreds of tiny feet moving in unison. By the time you realize what's happening, it's too late. A wall of segmented horror rises up before you, mandibles clicking with mechanical precision, and you become just another meal for the largest land arthropod that ever lived. The fossil. Record tells us that Arthropleura wasn't just widespread, it was incredibly successful. Specimens have been found across what is now Europe, North America, and parts of Asia, suggesting that these giants had conquered virtually every suitable habitat on the planet. Some fossils show evidence of molting, the process by which arthropods shed their exoskeletons to grow larger. Can you imagine stumbling across the discarded shell of a 9-foot millipede, still perfectly preserved and gleaming with an otherworldly sheen? It would be like finding the shed skin of a dragon. But perhaps the most unsettling evidence of Arthropleura's dominance comes in the form of trackways, fossilized footprints that show exactly how these monsters moved through their world. These trackways, some stretching for dozens of feet, reveal a creature that moved with purpose and confidence. The spacing of the footprints suggests a surprisingly fast gait, while the depth of the impressions hints at the immense weight these creatures carried. Following one of these ancient trails is like retracing the steps of a prehistoric nightmare, each footprint a reminder that this was once a world ruled by invertebrate giants. The question that haunted scientists for decades was simple. How did they get so big? The answer, as is often the case in paleontology, is beautifully complex. The Carboniferous period was a perfect storm of evolutionary opportunity. The high oxygen levels were just part of the equation. The warm, humid climate created vast wetlands and forests that produced unprecedented amounts of plant material, a nearly endless food source for herbivorous arthropods. At the same time, the lack of large vertebrate predators meant that there was little to stop arthropods from growing to enormous sizes. It was an evolutionary arms race without end, with each generation growing larger and more formidable than the last. But this golden age of giants couldn't last forever. As the Carboniferous period drew to a close, the world began to change in ways that would seal Arthropleura's fate. Oxygen levels started to drop, the climate became cooler and drier, and new types of predators began to emerge. Early reptiles, freed from their dependence on water for reproduction, started to colonize terrestrial environments with increasing success. These vertebrate predators brought with them advantages that arthropods simply couldn't match. More efficient circulatory systems, more sophisticated nervous systems, and most importantly, the ability to grow large without relying on impossibly high oxygen levels. The extinction of Arthropleura wasn't sudden or dramatic. It was a slow, inexorable decline that played out over millions of years. As their world changed around them, these giants found themselves increasingly unable to compete. Their massive size, once their greatest advantage, became a liability in a world with less oxygen and more efficient predators. One by one, populations began to dwindle, until finally, sometime during the early Permian period, the last Arthropleura drew its final breath, ending a reign that had lasted for over 50 million years. Today, the only evidence of their existence lies buried in rock, formations around the world waiting for paleontologists with the patience and skill to uncover their secrets. But every time we find a new fossil, every time we piece together another fragment of their story, we're reminded of just how alien our planet's past really was. Earth was once a world where 9-foot millipedes ruled the land, where the very air was thick enough to support giants that would be impossible today, where nightmares walked on 750 legs. And perhaps most unsettling of all, we're reminded that evolution is far from finished. The descendants of Arthropleura still live among us. Those harmless little millipedes in our gardens and forests carry within their DNA the genetic blueprint that once built monsters. Under the right conditions, with the right environmental pressures, who's to say that giants couldn't rise again? After all, if there's one thing the fossil record teaches us, it's that life finds a way to fill every available niche, no matter how impossible it might seem. The age of Arthropleura may be over, but the age of giants may not be finished forever.